Well, who would have thought that we'd enter the double digits this soon? Yes, we are indeed in Archetype Rematch Volume 10. Who would have thought that this time would come so soon? I remember it like it was yesterday when I started the whole sub-series, but yet here we are. Anyway, in this volume, we broke, unfortunately, our lovely little streak as we finally have some blue ice support in this one. But this one is a bit different, and we'll get into that rather soon in this video. But before we get to that, we have to cover the one singular new Infernity support card, Return of the Reaper, which is a normal spell, which is basically protection, revival, and, well, it's your basic run-of-the-mill setup card, always treated as an Infernity card, so it can be searched out by Archfiend, and it allows you to trigger said Archfiend, so obviously you run at least 2 or 3 of these because the card is just that good. And now let's finally see what these new Blue Eyes guys were up to. First, our first new card from the Blue Eyes archetype is the Tyrant of D. Okay, so the obvious thing to say here right now is the first effect is literally never going to go off, while the second effect clearly shows the Blue Eyes' will to improve nowadays because they are taking a lot of cues from their superior Red Eyes counterparts in terms of effect design by making them more like them in the way how they focus more on graveyard setup and revival in this new support wave. And this guy is a very good example of that because holy shit, the archetype finally has a nice and convenient way to summon their signature monsters onto the field. Except for one slight problem that this thing is a spellcaster for some reason. Well, it would be more appreciative of them to have made this thing into a warrior type monster because then it would be a dark warrior. Of course, then it would be a target for Armageddon Knight. It would be searched out by Rhoda, and yeah, I guess they really don't love them that much after all because they wouldn't dare to give them this godly of a consistency in that regard. Anyway, this thing is an absolute masterpiece of engineering in terms of Blue Eyes support, that is, and you should always max out on it. Blue Eyes Jet Dragon is another great example of what I was talking about them showing that they look that they take after their superior Red Eyes counterparts, as controlling 2 of these is basically a similar type of protection as you get in Red Eyes by controlling two Meteor Dragon Gemini monsters. Although rounding up 2 of these is a bit more tricky, even with newer support than the Meteor Dragons, because this does not have the benefit of being a Gemini, which is either a blessing or a curse. You decide with the whole thing regarding Catalyst Field and whatnot. But anyway, this is a really good card. It's a trading target, and yeah, it's our last main deck monster and our final monster for Blue Eyes, for the Blue Eyes support, and hopefully forever, is Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon, a monster which is easily one of their best extra deck monsters, and holy shit, it took them a while to finally make something that is worth fusion summoning. And yes, you will be fusion summoning this because they actually have their own fusion spell now. And yeah, this monster also has a very confusing origin since it's literally Blue Eyes White Dragon with the equipped with Tyrant Burst Dragon. The legendary Dragon Fusion, and it has literally the exact same effect and stats as Tyrant Burst Dragon, so yeah, it's literally just the regular Blue Eyes White Dragon equipped with Tyrant Burst Dragon, and yeah, it's also a straight upgrade over the Tyrant Burst Dragon because you do not need to run the shitty legendary Dragon Fang of Critias card. So yeah, this is a fantastic card, and to prove that, here's their fusion spell card, Ultimate Fusion. I do not know if the title fits, but yep, it's in terms of effect, it is literally the archetypal fusion spell, so you obviously run it, and it's also a quick play, so There is also no need to run poly anymore, and you can only use it for some disruption if you are lucky enough. Although I'm not sure it is worth the title of Ultimate Fusion. I mean, Gem Knight Fusion would most likely be more deserving of that title, but anyway. Apparition with the Eyes of Blue is our next card that we have on the platter today. It's a continuous spell with a decent effect, but it is a bit confusing how it's worded. But overall, it's a very niche and decent effect to have, and it doesn't hurt to run it at least one copy because you can get some mileage out of this thing. And our last card is the True Light, which is a blatant copy of the Dark Magician's Eternal Soul continuous trap. So yeah, it's not worth it. And with each of these crappy revival cards for dragon-based archetypes they release, I'm pretty sure they keep forgetting that Return of the Dragon Lords is a thing. So yeah, moving along and not looking back. We have the Red Eye support, only with 2 cards this time. Red Eye's Black Meteor Dragon is a free special summonable level 6, which can become a level 7, which is very important for the archetype. Free resource for links to rank 7 place, need I say more. And Red Eye Soul does a similar thing, but it's also pretty good. So yeah, you definitely want to max out on both of these because they're also allure targets. The Great Soul is the singular new support card for the Resonator and Red archetypes, and again, it's okay, but completely unnecessary in this deck because these kinds of attack values can be reached by their own monsters naturally rather than requiring a copy of this thing in order to pull it off. But I guess you can side one of them for some fun surprises, if anything. Then the next archetype, which has several cards worth of support, are the Gem Knight archetype. And first of all, we have Brilliant Rose, which is literally just another copy of Crystal Rose in terms of how it functions. So this is actually a really nice thing to have. And you should always run 3 of them, just like Crystal Rose. Gem Knight Quartz is another great card in terms of recycling and being able to be used as a fusion searcher. So yeah, it searches out specifically fusion continuous spells, which would be lovely if Brilliant Fusion was still around, but we do have a new fusion continuous spell, so we'll see it in just a bit. Our now new fusion monster for the Gem Knight is Gem Knight Lady Rose Diamond, which actually has a pretty good negation effect. However, it only works on your turn, but the consolation for that, at least, is that it's not a once per turn, which is amazing. You can keep spamming it as long as you like, provided you have the resources to spend in the graveyard. So yeah, definitely worth putting in your extra deck every once in a while. And speaking of said new fusion continuous spell, we have Scatter Fusion, which is clearly aware that we are all weeping for the loss of Brilliant Fusion way back when. God, I can't believe how time flies. But anyway, yeah, this is a very interesting card, and it's definitely worth playing if you play the Gem Knight Quartz, which is also a good card in its own right. So yeah, definitely run a couple of these. Next up, we have a single new support card for the Battle Guard archetype, and that is Battle Guard 0 with 50 attack and a 100 defense. This is honestly kudos worth for me. So yeah, it basically does everything for the archetype. It even searches out the Feast of the Wild level 5, which technically wasn't a Battle Guard card based on how it was worded, but this officially makes it a part of the archetype. I even forgot to look at the card even at my initial review, but I put my thoughts about it in the description. No, not in the description, in the comments of said video. But yeah, Battle Guard 0 is basically, well, you can search it out with Rhoda and summon it with 1/1. So yeah, it's a fantastic searcher for the archetype, which honestly makes this archetype kind of consistent as a side deck option or as a tech choice, if anything. So yeah, Another new archetype another new card for an archetype is the legendary Swordmaster Blackluster Soldier, which is the singular new support card for the Blackluster Soldier archetype, and it's phenomenal. I really have nothing else to say about it. It's the premier ritual monster they will be summoning all the time since, well, the vanilla Blackluster Soldier is not worth it, and Super Soldier is not very good. Yeah, you do need normal monsters for this one, to, in order to make this thing pack more of a punch, but what this thing does is simply mind-blowing for Blackluster Soldier standards, so you obviously you go out and make the most out of it because this thing is such a joy to play around with. And next up we have Chronicle Sorceress, which is the exact same thing as Chronicle Magician, but based on Dark Magician Girl. And it basically sets up the graveyard for Dark Magicians and Blue Eyes, I know, but it's going to be more alive in the Dark Magician family rather than Blue Eyes, so... And if there are any more cards with this nature that also work on Blue Eyes, I will just leave out the Blue Eyes entirely because I'm wired to do so. And so, yeah. Our next archetype, which received one new card worth of support, are Jars, with Flip Jar, which is nowhere near as versatile as the rest of its brethren. So, yeah, let's just move on. Next up, we have the Synchro of Psychic new boss monster, that being the Psychic and the Punisher. And yeah, for a boss monster, it has fantastic artwork and a really good effect. It's definitely worth building towards it if you can actually afford it, since this is a level 11 Synchro, and those are comically difficult to get to without appropriate setup. So yeah. Next up, we have Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid Neo Tempest Terahertz, the long-lost brother of Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Doger, and why did I do this? Well, naming convention aside, this is essentially Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid without the need to run the Fusion Synchro Xyz and Ritual Cyberse monsters as bricks, and... well, that technically is fine, and it is one of the main selling points of this card. I still kind of like controlling the original just because of the novelty and my Converging Wishes Quasar spam ability of generating big boss monsters strategy kind of thing. I have no idea what I just said, but I am not repeating it, so let's just move on since this was the last and only card of the Firewall archetype that got new support. Anyway, Angel with Blue Tears is not technically a Trickstar support card, but given how the effect and the artwork are, it might as well be. It's a searcher for their trap cards, which only means that you're going to be taking it in order to recycle your Trickstar reincarnations, so you can basically stop your opponent dead in his tracks if he somehow manages to get back up in the action after performing a successful Trickstar reincarnation and Droll and Lockbird combo once. So it's technically a good card to consider having then. And once again, it's the only Trickstar support card. So yeah, we'll be moving on to the next archetype, which are Cyber Dragons, and they only got one new card worth of support, and I will be taking a look at another card which technically existed way before that, but this new card added the card to the archetype officially, and that is Evolution Result Burst, which basically searches Overload Fusion and turns any fusion monster into Chimera Tech Over Dragon and gets over dragons, try saying that many times in a row, inability to attack directly with multiple times on how many fusion materials it used, as it basically gives its anime effect into action, where Chimera Tech Over Dragon can attack multiple times based on the fusion materials, regardless if it's attacking a monster or attacking directly. And for the card it adds to the archetype, Overload Fusion, as everybody knows, is a Miracle Fusion for Dark Machine type monsters, so it's pretty self-explanatory in that regard. And then now we move on to Stardust Worm, which is the first out of the out of the 3 new Stardust and Synchron support cards. And this little critter is easily summonable and sets up Exil Synchro plays or Majestic Star Dragon plays. So you obviously run a couple of these if you want to make the best out of those 2 playstyles. And then we have a retrain of Stardust Dragon, that being Exil Synchro Stardust Dragon. And yeah, I get the idea behind this one, but I honestly think it does not even compare to the original or even Stardust Spark Dragon. So yeah, run it by preference, but don't expect to use it all that often. Next up we have Ready Set Duel, which is the last support card for the Synchrons and Stardust Dragons, and it's essentially another search card for the Synchrons because it can basically, you activate this and you activate tuning and you actually get 2 tuner monsters, 2 searches off in 1 turn, and you can basically set up some crazy boards with this thing and tuning combined. And it also spreads signal counters if you were a fan of Signal Warrior for some reason, so absolutely go nuts on this card. And next up we have a few more cards which only got a few cards worth of support. And the first one being number 39, Utopia Rising, which is the only support card for the Utopia archetype, and it's basically meant to mimic, like you can see in the artwork, the final turn in the duel where Yuma and Nash went against Dawn 1000, where the other Xyz monsters effects, other number monster effects were applied to Utopia, although it basically only revives another Xyz monsters and gives it Xyz materials, which is pretty unremarkable for an effect like this, and this is definitely not something you want to waste your extra deck space on. So yeah, it's worth it for the novelty, but not for anything else. Next up we have the one new Performapal support card, that being Performapal Greatest Duelist, which is very weird in terms of its design, but it also supports the Supreme King archetype, which leads us to the other support card of the Supreme King archetype, which is the Supreme King Soul, which is a very cute shortcut to your Supreme King, although he loses all of its effects, which basically makes him a glorified vanilla 4000 attack beatstick, which is kind of fine, but the lack of its signature effects is kind of bothersome. But it basically sets up your inevitable summoning of him again, so yeah, I guess it's not all that bad, but being a trap card is a heavy detriment in this day and age. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a whole load of new hero support cards, mainly focuses on the Neospatian heroes aspect. So let's begin. Crosskeeper is basically another version of Crossporter, basically being a reference to that card, and it basically is a okay setup tool, better than Crossporter in order to set up your elemental hero Neospatian plays, and it's also searchable and special summonable by other warrior support stuff, so I guess it's not all that bad. Elemental hero Spirit of Neos should have been a long overdue retrain and replacement for the original elemental hero Neos, but what it does is good enough for it to be considered a staple in terms of pure Neospace builds, and that would conclude it for the main deck monsters. Now we move on to Elemental Hero Shining Neos Wingman, which requires the original Neos and a Wingman fusion monster. And yeah, it's basically has the exact same effect as the Shining Flare Wingman along with the burn effect, and it also has a very potent nuke effect, but it basically requires a whole deck being built around it, so experiment with it and you should probably see if it's any good or not, or if it fits with your playstyle. Wake Up Your Elemental Hero is another very weird design because it features cards in the artwork that no one in their right mind would ever consider maining. However, this thing is actually kind of decent as a fusion material, because the most interesting aspect of this thing is its floating effect, where you're allowed to special summon any warrior monster from your hand or deck, which is absolutely insane. And yeah, I'm not sure what they were thinking when they made this effect, but I honest to God would not be too surprised to see this thing hit the ban list at some point in the future, just because of this floating effect, because I'm sure people will find a way to abuse it every now and then. Fusion Exceed is a very poor attempt to make an archetypal super poly here, so let's just move on. N-Wave is a continuous spell which provides some niche benefits to your field by letting you summon effect stuff from the deck, which is kind of okay. Instant Contact is something they should have had from the very start, so I don't know why they printed it almost 20 years after it. So now we move on to their last spell card, Engage Neospace, which is a pretty damn good Avid Searcher, and it also sets up your graveyard, so there's also that. And finally, Favorite Contact is a very good trap card, but it is a trap card, so it is inherently slower, but so it basically makes these effects not too worth it. But the second protection effect, where it basically prevents shuffling back into the extra deck, is pretty damn good, so not all is bad. Now we move on to the two new Charmer support cards. Well, one of them theoretically is not new. It existed for a long time, but I forgot to put it in the initial review because I did not know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki considered it a support card for this archetype, and that is the Ida the Sun Magician. Simply put, this is the bread and butter of all flip-based archetype and should always be run at 3 copies, no matter what flip archetype of spellcasters it might be. Of course, it says flip spellcasters because Charmers are the prime example of flip-based spellcasters, so yeah. And lastly, we have the Dark Charmer Umbral, which is essentially the final Link Charmer that was missing. Yeah, this one was made for Dark Monsters. I've talked about these numerous times before, so I won't repeat myself again. Although it is worth noting that this thing is the most expensive of them. So, last time I checked, it went around for €2. So I don't know, maybe this guy has some hidden utility that I'm not aware of, and that is leading its price to increase higher and higher, so I have no idea. Next up, we have another new support card from the Umi Brigade, as I like to call them. Then that being Amphibious Bowgrowth Mark 11, or yeah, it is supposed to be 11, not 2. It would have been written differently. But anyway, this is kind of nonsensical, as it basically gives off a negative effect while Yumi is on the field, which is kind of backwards considering that Yumi is the whole playstyle of this Umi Brigade. So yeah, it's also a level 5 with no inherent special summon effect. So yeah, forget this one even exists and move on. Now we move on to 2 new Magnet Warrior support cards. The first one being Epsilon the Magnet Warrior. It's an Armageddon it's an Armageddon Knight for the archetype. It has a name switching effect, so it helps out with Magna Warrior plays. So it's a decent level 4 in its own right. So you definitely run a 2 or 3 of these. Magnet Induction is another excellent support card for the archetype, and you also run 2 to 3 of these because the utilities it provides is simply fantastic for an archetype as niche as this one. So yeah. And now we move on to something that has really taken me by surprise when they announced it, and I'm very happy to see them get some new support, and those are Amazoness. And yeah, first off, we have Amazoness Shaman, which has by far one of my favorite artworks of all time. I mean, look at this. It's freaking gorgeous. And it's a special summonable card which searches out polymerization specifically for some reason, which is honestly the worst thing about this card, seeing how in this support wave they also received their own fusion spell. So that second part of the effect doesn't make so much sense, but hey, if you're ever in a pinch, you can search out a polymerization here and there. So yeah, but the fact that it's another free resource you can special summon is basically highly appreciated. And next up we have their two pendulum monsters, Amazoness Silver Sword Master and Amazoness Golden Whip Master, who have literally the exact same pendulum and monster effect. The only thing that is different between them is their stats, as they have flipped attack and defense, and their pendulum scales are different. One's a scale 1 and the other is a scale 7. And the utility they provide is fantastic, and it basically allows the Amazoness to rise in power in terms of attack gainage, and it also allows them to swarm the field more efficiently than ever before. So naturally, you run at least 2 of each in order for the deck to function, although I would have appreciated a pendulum call like searching card, which is something they still do not have, but maybe they do get it at some point. And now we're moving on to the extra deck. We have Amazoness King Liger, which has the potential to prevent your opponent from attacking if you control 2 of them. And it also has the typical Liger boss abilities like the pet Liger from before. So yeah, this is an excellent sub-boss monster to run, while the prime boss monster is Amazoness KAISERIN, which is simply another excellent beatstick and battle-focused boss monster for the archetype. Need I say more? It has excellent stats, great artwork, and its effect is simply aces. Really, it's really good combo as well with Amazoness Empress as well, who I still think has the superior artwork. This one is a bit too buff, but I do not mind it all that much, but I would prefer the old Empress over this thing. So yeah, in terms of artwork, that is, the effects are on the same scale of usefulness. And the last thing we have here is Amazoness Secret Technique, which is their archetypal fusion spell, so I do not need to elaborate too much here. Next up we have Crystal Beasts with 2 new support cards, the first one being Rainbow Dragon Overdrive. Okay, so I really don't think that we needed another boss monster like this, and yeah, it is a fantastic beatstick and a simply overwhelming boss monster, but this summoning condition is so absolutely out the ass, and it basically ensures that this thing will never hit the field, let alone hit the extra deck. So yeah, the other Fusion Dragon is better than this, so yeah, don't bother with this one in my opinion. And Bridge of Salvation is by far the best definition of win more, so and the kind of effect that will so rarely ever go off that you basically are contemplating should you even side it or not. So yeah, not to mention if some Crystal Beasts don't even play the Rainbow Dragon builds, so it's really a waste of pack space or deck space if you decide to include it or not. So yeah. Next up we have Witchcrafters with 2 other support cards. The first one being one fusion monster, Witchcrafter Vice Master, which provides some very appreciated generic spellcaster support, and as well as pure Witchcrafter support in its effects, and it's a pretty good extra deck monsters for Witchcrafters to go into. And of course, Witchcrafter Confusion is their archetypal fusion spell, so let's just move on. And our next archetype that received only 1 card worth of support is the Magistus archetype, with ZOROA the Magistus Daimon, a synchro monster which pretty much functions exactly like all the other Magistus do, with the equipping effect and providing some benefits with said equip. This one being that it prevents effect activation from extra deck monsters, which is actually pretty good. Then yeah, it's also a decent beatstick, so yeah, it's a good card. And now we have a whole bunch of cards which only received 1 card worth of support, so let's just get this over with. Daigasto Laplampilica, yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister, but anyway. Daigasto Laplampilica is a very easy to access synchro, which can also serve as an excellent synchro climbing tool. So yeah, this is another excellent addition to the Win Synchro toolbox. So yeah. Next up, we have Sunvine Sowing, the new card for the Sun Avalon archetype, which is an archetypal special summon from deck, and it also has graveyard protection that came to return from the Dragon Lord, so it's absolutely worth running at 3 copies. Next up, we have the 2 new support cards for the XYZ series of cards, the Union monsters. A to Z, actually, that's the name of the archetype, although these new support cards only support XYZ Dragon Cannon. XYZ Combine is essentially allows you to make 2 XYZ Dragon Cannons all at once, and I am going to say if this kind of effect was made for ABCs, it would be a lot more busted and probably see the ban list very quickly. And XYZ Hyper Cannon is a continuous trap that basically allows XYZ Dragon Cannon to use its effect on the opponent's turn, which is actually mind-blowing when you think about it, while the other effect is some simple recovery and recycling, which is always appreciated. The next archetype that got some new support is the Plague Spreader archetype with Crazy Clown, who is another Plague Spreader zombie wannabe and a level manipulator, which comes at a constellation with Reviving from the Graveyard, which of course Plague Spreader Zombie, the original, can do much better, so there's nothing too interesting to see here. And our final card for today's volume is UTOPIA, a field spell which is made to support the Barian Emperor archetype, which essentially are numbers 101 to 107, and it basically turns any of those numbers, regardless of what they are, into number 101 Silent Honor arc, which is kind of funny when I think about it. So it's a niche use, but I do recommend running at least one of these as a side option since terraforming is a thing, but it's limited, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, this was a rather interesting volume of archetypal support. There is also one card already ready and set in the volume 11 folder on my desktop, so yeah. I don't know when that support wave is going to be filled up with 59 more support cards, but whenever it will be, I'll be the first one to inform you about it. Maybe, hopefully. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching this installment of Archetype Rematch, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care, and maybe check out my Patreon if you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. As usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can, and thank you also so much for watching. Stay tuned, and see you all, and have a good day. Peace.